probably best that we don't do that.
Yeah, so I didn't. All right.
We live.
And we are live. Hello, everyone. If you are a regular listener for our podcast, Champs Lunch, then this is the first time you're actually seeing us. You've heard our voices before, but this is the first time you're actually seeing us. This is our first ever live stream. We wanted to give this a try because the Ultimate Schmoedown, of course, is starting. It actually started today, but we have not watched the match yet, so don't worry about that. But we're going to be picking our brackets for the Ultimate Schmoedown, going through each match in the singles tournament and telling who we think is going to win. And I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Shelton. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. I just moved into a new apartment, or as I like to call it, my new recording studio. So all perfect timing to have our first video podcast as well. So.
Yeah, so we're hoping if this is successful, we'll do a couple more videos, probably again when the teams tournament happens. And then for our main podcast, Some Like It Scott, which if you all don't listen to Some Like It Scott, you can check that out in the same feed where you find Champs Lunch. Just type in Some Like It Scott. But you should check that out on Apple Podcasts. And we're going to be doing a live stream for our end of the year episode when we have our best movies of the year episode. And we are going to be counting down our top 10 movies of the year. And we have a couple of guests who are going to be on that episode. So you're not going to want to miss that live stream for sure. So yeah, we're hoping to make this a somewhat regular thing going forward. But for now, if you're ready, Scott, let's get into these brackets, shall we?
Why not? Let's do it.
Okay, let me actually pull up the bracket here. I think I know most of it off the top of my head, but got to be safe. All right, let's start up in that top left quadrant, where there's not seeds for this, which is probably a good thing. If any of the face-off people are watching, you know how imprecise that seeding can be from the way that this tournament has gone. But we have who is surely one of the top seeds in the tournament, and that's Mark Riley, going up against Stacey Howard. Scott, another matchup between the Horsemen and Corruption. We've been seeing a ton of these matchups lately, most of which have been going in Corruption's favor. Obviously, Riley's the favorite here. Do you think that this rivalry is going to continue to go in Corruption's favor?
Man, I feel like every time I talk about a match with Stacey Howard, and I somehow convince myself that I probably could pick her for an upset, or at one point she was probably the favorites for some of these matches. But for me, in this case, so when I'm thinking about this match, I'm thinking, Mark hasn't played really since he played Snyder. So I don't think Who's the Boss has played since then, and that was a long time ago. And I know that it's not like he's been retired and out of the Schmoedown for a year or anything like that at this point. But I'm like, well, Stacey Howard played a team's match and did pretty well with Tim Franco with Crimson Fury. But then I think about all the other times she's been in singles this year, and she hasn't really impressed or exceeded any bar or expectations. And so as much as I'd like to be able to say this is going to be where the one of the upsets happens, because she has upset people in the past in the Ultimate Schmoedown Singles tournament, I'm going to go with Mark Riley here. I think things will go the Five Horsemen's way in this one over Corruption. Maybe get the first win in a while over them. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Mark Riley.
Yeah, Scott, we've talked a lot about Stacey and her ups and downs on the podcast. I talk about that I'm a fan of her, not just because we have the same birthday. I think that she was a good heel back in the day. She's still a good heel, to be honest. I enjoyed watching her and Brienne when they were on a team together. But yeah, she's incredibly inconsistent. Her best win so far was in the first round of the Ultimate Schmoedown tournament against Mark Ellis, but that was 2 years ago. And if you remember back to that tournament, the next match, this is something that most people don't talk about for good reason. If you're a Stacey fan, the next match after she beat Ellis, she got KO'd by Rachel Cushing in the second round. And only scored single-digit points or something. It was an absolute bloodbath. And so, that just kind of epitomizes the career that she's had, I think, in the Schmoedown thus far. Just really not able to string any sort of quality wins together. The last time we saw her was in that that collision match, the Manager Bowl, and she played pretty well in that match despite coming in 4th place. But I've been hurt too many times before, to think that she's going to rebound from that and be able to take out someone of Mark Riley's caliber. I will talk about some of my misgivings maybe about Riley in a little bit, but I don't think he's going to have any trouble with this match. So we'll save that for a little bit. And I do have him moving on as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you even think back to the match at Collision, and correct me if I'm misremembering this, but she really didn't have that good of a match. I mean, I guess everyone did well in round 1. I think she was either the lowest or second lowest score, which is saying like she got 6 or 7 points, which is pretty good. It's a pretty good first round. But I mean, she was trailing the pack pretty heavily, and only with a perfect round 3 did she really put herself, give herself that respectable showing that we know that she's capable of, right? So, similar in ways which maybe like with Founding Fathers scoring all 10 points in their round 3 against Corruption in that number 1 contenders match. I think that sometimes a really good round 3, which you can't always count on because those 5-point questions are so difficult.
Right.
Sometimes they can really put a gloss on an otherwise average performance, which ultimately maybe everyone's performance was above average in that match, and so maybe it's unfair to say that she wasn't up to that same standard. But I do think that it did kind of gloss over an average performance.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. And yeah, I think Riley will take this one. I've also heard that he's been using some new study methods, so we'll have to see how those work out. But it seems like to really succeed in the Schmoedown nowadays, you do have to have some sort of off-kilter study methods. But
yeah, I mean, he probably got that from Ben Bateman, who is known for, I mean, along with Kalinowski, being one of the people who pioneered the newer studying tactics. Of course, Kevin Smet's in the dungeon in there as well. But that's something that the 5 Horsemen probably need more of. But I mean, not to tell Dan Murrell how to do his job, because he is the greatest of all time. Yeah. But I don't know. They're in a bit of a tough spot right now, but I'm sure they'll rebound.
All right, moving on now to the match, which actually dropped today. Scott, like we said, we haven't watched the match yet, so we do not know the result of this. It's very possible that 2 hours from now, we're going to regret everything that we've said here. But who do you like between Whitney, the Beauty Seibold, former member of Critically Acclaimed, 0-1 in the singles division, but still making it into the tournament, still a very knowledgeable player, going up against one of the rising stars in this league, Brendan the Kid Meyer. Started out 0-1, but then had that amazing free-for-all performance, and then beat Video Drew to get his first singles win. So he is 1-1 on the rise. Scott, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I think this is a hard one because we haven't really seen much of Whitney this year, right? I mean, we got the one singles match from him earlier this year where he did lose against, is it Diamond Dave Del Rio? Is that who he lost to?
Yeah, that's who he lost to, yeah.
Yeah, which, he is a very respectable competitor and, no tough loss. I mean, he would have beaten Paul Preston probably, if not for a absolutely disastrous round 2, it's fair to say, a couple weeks back. But it does give me pause for concern because I think we had really high expectations for Whitney coming into singles after his really great career as a part of Critically Acclaimed. Of course, I think he's played 3 matches this year total, so we're really not working from very much here going into the tournament. I think I am going to give him the edge. I think that Brendan Meyer, I like him a lot, and I would not at all be surprised if he did end up winning this match. But I think that Whitney, it's going to mean a lot to him. I think obviously kayfabe is kayfabe, but I think he's really going to want to prove himself after losing that first round match. And I'm not saying Brendan Meyer won't want to win this also, because it's going to matter to him being Bibbs' new partner. This match is going to matter to both of them. But I think that Whitney has a lot more to prove and is going to want to prove that, even though he hasn't been in the ring as much as Brendan has recently. So I'm going to go with Whitney. I'm going to go with the upset, I think.
Yeah, I think it probably is an upset, although I have to say, Scott, looking at this left side of the bracket, I really think, like, when I looked at this to start off with, I thought there are 6 people of the 8 over here that I could legitimately see making it all the way to the finals. It's a very open left side of the bracket. I would leave, if I had to leave 2 people out, it would be Stacy and Liz Shannon Miller, I think, are the 2 people over there that I would be surprised if they made the finals. Mm-hmm. But this is going to be one of the closest and most competitive matches, I think, for the reasons that you've stated. But I'm going to go the other way. I think the Kid is going to be a sleeper in this tournament. Yeah. Obviously, I guess the one reservation we have about him is that we haven't seen a ton of what he can do in round 3, because free for all is all round 1 questions, and I believe he only had to answer one round 3 question. I think he only had to answer his 2-pointer when he went up against Video Drew. So not the biggest test that he got there, but I still think that he's been improving. I think he's been studying a lot since that first match, and yeah, I mean, you have to think about the kayfabe as well. Is Whitney going to be rattled going into this match? I think he does have a pretty wide range of knowledge, but as we've seen, there are some specific areas maybe where he might get tripped up. And so it's going to be close, but I like the momentum that the kid has coming into this match, because we haven't seen Whitney in a while. He does have a team at some point that we'll probably see in the teams tournament with him and Mark Edward Hoyk. But he hasn't played, I don't believe, since either since that singles match or since Critically Acclaimed lost the title match to the Shire Wolves.
I'm not sure which was more recent.
Yeah, but so it's been a while, and for that reason, I think I'm going to go with Brendan in this one.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair pick. And to your point, exactly, if he ends up in the final on this side of the draw, that wouldn't be my pick personally. He'd have to go through some strong competitors, Whitney included, but it wouldn't surprise me necessarily. I think that there's a lot of people over here that are very even on the left side of the draw. Maybe the upper left corner that we're talking about right now is a little bit weaker than that bottom left corner, but anyone could emerge out of this. And if Brendan does, that won't surprise me at all. I think that it's a very valid point that Whitney hasn't played in a while, and who knows if he's going to come in hungry and having studied for the last month, or if he's going to come in kind of just sleepwalking his way into the tournament and not thinking too much about it. Because I'll be honest, the person who I was most surprised to see in this draw is Whitney Seibold, especially with the absence of Dan Murrell. And I wonder if Dan were in this Ultimate Schmoedown Singles tournament, if we'd even have Whitney. And it also makes me think that may be leading into something happening in New York with a certain title shot on the line. But I think that it is what it is, right? We have Whitney, and he's a good competitor, but he's not even ranked in singles. I actually had pulled up the rankings.
Well, he doesn't have a win. So.
Well, exactly my point, but I'm saying that's why I was surprised. Granted, was he the first choice? Maybe not. I mean, I would have expected someone like JTE and
Mark Andreyko,
especially Mark Andreyko, even Eric Zipper or someone like that. If you have Stacey Howard in the tournament, I'm surprised Eric Zipper couldn't be either. So I think that he's a little bit of a surprise here, and I think that could go in your favor with the fact that he's even surprised to be in the tournament. Or maybe it could go the other way where he's really hungry, and if he studies a lot, I think his ceiling might be higher than the kids. So we'll see.
We will see indeed. All right, Scott, let's move on to the next match. I talked about 6 of the 8 people I could see making the finals, and the next 2 guys are included in that 6. The Professor, Lon Harris, and the Powder Keg, Paul Preston. Obviously, we saw this match just a couple of weeks ago. Lon Harris coming out on top in a very close, very hard-fought match. Do you think he can make it 2 in a row here?
It's hard to ever bet against Lon. I mean, I know that his record doesn't always necessarily reflect that he's one of the strongest singles players in the Schmoedown, but I think he's probably one of the strongest singles players in the Schmoedown. I mean, I will never forget his incredible battle with Ethan Irwin from last year, very early on in the season. I think it was Ethan's second or third match in the league, and it was quite the fight between the two of them. And, it's such a bizarre thing to see Paul Preston and Lon Harris on the same table, at least in their kayfabe. I mean, Paul Preston, a bit off-putting, but I absolutely love his character. Not all the new characters in the Schmoedown this year have worked for me, but Paul's has surprisingly endeared himself to me, and I like him a lot. As for the actual way the match is going to shake out, Lon would have to have a really off day, I think, to lose to Paul, and I think that I don't know. Okay, well, you're raising your eyebrows at me. Maybe you're surprised by me saying that.
I mean. Go ahead, and then I'll
I was just gonna say, I love Paul. I'd love to see him win. I think Lon, things have to go Paul's way, I think, for him to get the upset, which is probably true of any upset, right? That's not that crazy of a thing to say, but Lon is the Professor. I think that he's better than his record may reflect. I mean, we say that about Drew McWeeny a lot too, that he's someone who's barely over 500 as a singles player, but he's not really always delivered in the results column. And, we were just talking to people who aren't in the tournament. Drew Guy and Drew McWhinney both also aren't in the singles tournament, both members of the family. And Robert Meyer Burnett commissioning the tournament is a real surprise. So I wonder if it's a scheduling thing or something weird's going to happen. Sorry.
And to jump in there, not to get off track from the bracket and talk about kayfabe or the nuke, but I really feel like the nuke is going to be something involving the family, because we haven't really seen Robert Meyer Burnett use the commissionership to help the family thus far. And, they did make it sound like this is his last action as commissioner. So I wouldn't be surprised if it helps the family some way, but we'll see. But back to the bracket.
I'm picking Lon Harris against my better judgment.
Right. I don't know. I just think that, you say that Lon would have to have an off day. Well, he almost had an off day in that first match because he was down to his last question. His back was really against the wall. It was one of those matches where Paul kind of controlled the match the whole way. But Lon Harris was just able to stay close enough to force him to answer that last question, and Paul Preston couldn't do it. And, it was one of those at the end of the match where I was like, wow, it feels kind of weird that Paul lost that match, because it just felt like we were going towards him winning the entire time. But Lon stayed just close enough. So I think this is a really close match. I think Paul is going to be my pick, just because he's shown he has a lot of knowledge. He's had a perfect round, I believe, in at least one match. I think he more than Lon had maybe the screwy day in that first match with the questions that he got. And I think that he's shown himself to be a more consistent player in the many recent matches that we've seen him in. So I'm going to go the other way, and I think that the powder keg is going to win this one.
I'd be happy to see that. I like his character more than Lon's.
They're both great characters, though. Let's be real.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just sad we don't get more of Cody as a student.
Yeah, that's true. But Cody is a little bit preoccupied at the moment. I do believe
taking paternity leave from school. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Last match on that left side of the bracket, Scott. Probably a bit of an easier one to predict than the.
You say that. That's probably where the upset's going to be now.
Yeah, it probably is. Ben Bateman, obviously, he had a chance to get to that title match in New York, lost to Kalinowski in a close match.
Great match.
And he's going to get Liz Shannon Miller, who had a number one contender shot back at the Collision, faced off against Paul Oyama, and lost that match after a fairly impressive 3-0 start to her career. Scott, who do you like?
I'm wearing my Team Bateman shirt just to show.
Reveal it.
Yep, Team Bateman. I got that for Houston when we went to that. But we'll see if I pick Ben Bateman to win this entire tournament. That's a matter that we'll discuss further shortly. But I think that I'm definitely picking Ben Bateman for this one. You say it's the easiest pick, and I think that's fair. For me on this left side, there's a lot of coin flips. Honestly, we could get all of these, these three that we talked about so far. We didn't pick the same people, but I could see them going either way. And yes, there will be certain picks that were upsets, but I don't think either of us would be surprised if any of the people won of the first six that we just talked about.
Yeah.
That being said, I will be surprised if Liz Shannon Miller beats Ben Bateman. That doesn't mean she won't. She could have, taken her lessons that she learned against Paul Oyama to heart, gone in and studied and gotten a lot sharper. But I think that, this has been said before about other runs, maybe, and at least I should say, and I think it's often been said invalidly before, but I think she really had an easy 3-0 run. I mean, her match with JTE was very weird. I mean, we talk all the time about, or it gets talked about all the time about question difficulty being imbalanced in certain categories. But I mean, that's some of the most stark imbalances and difficulty of questions I've ever seen in round two. But that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And that's how you can only answer the questions that are in front of you if you're Liz Shannon Miller. But I think that we both felt going into that number one contenders match that it was going to be an easy victory for Paul Yama. And it was maybe even easier than we thought it was going to be, but it was an easy victory. And I think that unless she really hit the books hard since Collision, I think that it's going to be roughly the same story here with Ben, unless, of course, the wheel goes her way, like it did against JTE, right? It can happen. But I think that Ben is the clear favorite in my mind for this match, especially the way he's been performing. Yes, he did lose to Kalinowski very recently, but that match could have gone either way too. It came down to that 5-point question. And, if that match had gone to overtime, that would have been surprising at all. And I think Ben is probably one of the best players in the tournament. So I think that he's going to make it through to round two at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, my one misgiving with picking against Liz is just that they always have this, they always say this remark about how, oh, Ethan Irwin picked her to be in the
Yeah, I hope they stop saying
singles tournament and said she was even better than he was. I don't think we've seen that so far, but there is that one slight misgiving about what happens if she suddenly
unleashes her
unleashes.
potential. Yeah,
Right. But I don't think we've seen that. As you pointed out, I think that the match with JTE in particular could have easily gone a different way on a different day. And when she finally got, I guess, what would be the toughest match she had for sure against Paul it wasn't a very competitive match. And so I think that the boss is still hungry. I think that the Horsemen need a win. And I think that he is going to be able to provide that win for them, at least in this match. Remains to be seen going forward. But he was really close to Kalinowski. He had the lead going into the third round, I believe. I think that's right. But just couldn't pull it out in the end. But I still believe in Ben, and I think he'll get past Liz. All right, let's move over to the right side of the bracket, Scott. Perhaps not quite as much of a battle on this side of the bracket as on the left side, but still some good matchups. One in particular that is catching my eye that we'll get to in just a second. Mm-hmm. But let's start off with Ethan Irwin and Haley Fouch. Scott, I want to throw something at you here that I just listened to on Collider Live. John Roca, the outlaw himself, is going with the upset in this match. He thinks that Haley Fouch is going to upset Ethan Irwin in New York. He pointed out Ethan Irwin, of course, did lose the last time he was in New York against Dan Murrell in that title match. And I think he believes in a New York curse for Ethan Irwin. Do you believe in the New York curse for Ethan Irwin?
I do not. Nope.
Yeah.
I love Haley. We've actually already predicted this match too, haven't we? I think we did this on our last Champs Lunch episode.
We might have, yeah.
Yeah, when we were talking about the New York Live event coming up. I love Haley, and what I said, I believe what I said, at least on that podcast, was anything could happen if she gets the horror category. She's probably not going to have the lead going into round 2, but if she gets a perfect 8 points by spinning the horror category, she could find herself right back in it. And Ethan's play, we've seen less of him, right? Ethan's play this season has probably been a little bit weaker than last season. We'll see if that continues. He is playing a little bit less frequently, which I think can ring rust is a continuum. Let's say
it's real.
Yeah, it's real. And it doesn't, you don't have to be off for 1 year before you experience ring rust. You can just be a little bit rusty, and that can affect your round 1 performance. I mean, I think, I was surprised that he wasn't higher on the top 10 list of round 1 points per match score that Frankie Numbers put up in the Facebook page I think it was last week. He was on the list, but I was surprised he wasn't further up the list. And so I think that may be because of his play this year so far, just being a little bit off of his standard, his really exceptionally high standard that he set last year. But I think that he will have enough, barring some real luck of the wheel, for Haley, because he's one of those players that, even if Haley gets 8 points and gets horror in round 2, even if he spends opponent's choice, does he have a weakness? I don't think the guy has a weakness. So he's still going to scrape out 5 or 6 points and be in the match for round 3. And I think that we've seen over the course of, the Schmoedown for the last year and a half, when both of them have been in it, that he's probably stronger in round 3 than she is, and it's probably worth a couple points more than she is in round 3. So I can really only see this going one way. I think, barring a truly exceptional couple of spins of the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks for Haley because I do think she's a really good player and I like her a lot. But for her to have to get this match up, it does kind of suck. She had a tough match against Eric Zipper, which I believe is the only singles match she's played so far. But she's really showed what she can do, in particular when she's on the Scream Queens. And I think, maybe if she was going up against like a Lon Harris, I would definitely think about going with the upset. Because I still think she'd be an underdog in that match. But I think that Ethan Irwin is just a buzzsaw. Even if he hasn't been as strong this year, it would have been hard to match the standard that he set last year. And I think, he definitely seemed like he was back in that last Time Machine match.
Agreed.
which of course went to overtime against Paddington too. And he definitely was firing on all cylinders in that match. And I think he will be doing so again here, with of course the caveat that he did lose in New York last time. But as Christian pointed out, Dan Murrell had to have a perfect game in a title match in order to fend off Ethan in front of that live crowd. So I don't think that the live atmosphere of New York really played that much into Ethan's loss as much as having to go up against the GOAT at the height of his powers did.
Yeah, and also to the point, going back to the beginning of this conversation about John Roca, I put very little stock in Roca's takes on just about anything. Love you on movie talk, John, but we have some disagreements, I think, on movies.
And we have John Roca in the chat right now, actually. No, I'm
kidding. That's amazing. Put that
up. He has his takes, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'd put it this way. If Haley Fouch does end up beating Ethan Irwin, it won't be some moment of genius from Roca that predicted it. It'll just be pure luck.
I'm sure he'll probably try to claim it was, but I think you're right about that.
He can do what he wants.
All right, Scott, let's move on to the next match, which I think to me is possibly the most eye-catching matchup in the first round of the Ultimate Schmoedown.
Yep.
William the Beast Bibiani and Chance Ellison, the Cobra. This is the match we're going to see in Arizona live.
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
Live match, just like the one that we predicted just a second ago with Ethan and Haley. Yeah. Scott, this one is a coin flip for me. It's hard to bet against the Beast. Former movie trivia Schmoedown champion of the world. There are few, if any, players in the league who have as much knowledge in his brain as the Beast does. But you look at Chance Ellison, you look at what he just did in that team title match against the Shire Wolves. Spoilers, if you haven't watched the match yet. But
too late.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I think most of you have probably watched it. But perfect first round in a match that featured Clark Wolf, Rachel Cushing, and Mike Kalinowski. And Chance was the only one to get a perfect round. He was clutch throughout the match. I really think he did make the difference in the match in the end for Corruption. He was good on the buzzers in round 4.
I don't even think. I think he was the difference, right? To your point, he was clutch on the last 3 questions in the buzzer round after Rachel took the first 2. He helped Kalinowski out with multiple bond questions. It was clear from watching the match. And the guy didn't miss a question until the final round.
And let's not discount the fact as well that he was 1 question away from facing Dan Murrell instead of Paul Oyama for that title. And
1 5-point question away.
1 5-pointer, exactly, that he just couldn't quite pull. And he very easily could have won that match and then beaten Dan.
Paul thought he was winning that match. Let's put it that way.
Right. And so he could very easily be the movie trivia Schmoedown champion of the world right now. As it happens, he is not. And much like, we were grieving the matchup that Haley got in the first round, I think it really does suck for Chance, whether you're a fan of him or not, to have to face someone like the Beast in the first round. Again, I'm not sure if they really seeded this thing or how the matchups really stacked out, but he's definitely got to feel like he got an unfair draw in this.
There's no way they seeded this thing, man. There's just no way.
Yeah, you're probably right. Of course, there is matchups like, Roca against Silvestrini, which is kind of a disparity in seeds that you would expect to see if they had seeded it out. Mm-hmm. But we'll get to that in a sec. Who do you like in this match?
Scott, you said it sucks for Chance to play Bibiani in round 1. I'll tell you that I think it sucks for Bibiani.
Maybe it sucks for Bibbs, yeah.
Because I think I'm going to go with Chance. I think the live event is going to help him. Obviously Bibiani does fine at live events. He did the free-for-all. I think he won a match with Critically Acclaimed as well at a live event, but I could be wrong about that. I'll probably have to fact check.
I don't think that's right.
Yeah, maybe not. Nope. Okay, maybe not. Well, anyway, I think the point is the free-for-all this past year, clearly, 2-time free-for-all MVP, this most recent year, of course, being a live event. Only round 1 questions, of course. We talked about that already earlier with Brendan Meyer. But I think Chance is on fire right now, no matter which way you cut it, right? He lost only by a hair to the current, like you said, movie trivia Schmoedown champion. So I think that Bibbs should be, more pissed than Chance is. I think Chance, I'm sure, is like, why couldn't I have Silvestrini or someone like that? And, no offense to those players, but I think that it is a tough matchup, and I'm gonna pick Chance.
I'm gonna be different here. Like I said, I think it is kind of a coin toss for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Chance win the entire tournament. I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with Bibbs. I think he's just such a beast.
He's a
I
beast.
think it's so hard to pick against someone with that much knowledge in their head. Of course, he does have losses, and he won that title only to immediately lose it again to John Roca. And
I was going to say Roca. I was like,
yeah. And I think he has his weaknesses as much as any other player does, but
I think he has fewer weaknesses than other players, but that's fair.
Right, but he has weaknesses just like any other player. Sure. I think it's just tough to pick against him, so I'm going with the Beast here. But it's going to be a fun match, of course. Chance, a factor we didn't talk about was that Chance will be playing in front of a home crowd in Arizona, where he's
that's
from.
what I was saying. The live event, I think it will help Chance. I should have been more explicit, but no, because it's his hometown. Right.
You're right. So interesting to see how that plays into it as well. And Corruption,
and the crowd will be warmed up by the Wild Berries. So I mean, you think the Wild Berries are going to be
warmed up indeed? Wild Berries. Okay. Unfortunately, Josh Makuga also not in the singles tournament.
Just missed out.
Big shame if you're asking me. All right, Scott. Let's move on. A match we alluded to a second ago. The Outlaw himself, John Roca, he of the hot takes, taking on Rachel Silvestrini, another player like Whitney Seibold, who is in the tournament despite being 0-1. Who do you like?
I'm going to pick John Roca in this one. I like Rachel. We briefly interacted with her while we were in Houston. So I think she was there, unless I'm just totally making that up. But
we said something. I don't even remember what it was about. But
I like Rachel. I think that she's not quite yet to that level. I hope she proves me wrong. I think she might be the weakest player in this bracket. That being said, weak players have pulled out upsets before that we weren't expecting.
If she gets Disney in round 2, I mean, she destroyed in that Disney match. So
absolutely, I mean, and we've seen her in Inky and the Brain matches, get her strength and do very well in round 2 as well. So it's not impossible. I think that in some ways,
Kevin Smith, she boosted that Kevin Smith round that one time too.
Yeah, no, that was exactly the one that I was thinking of. So we've seen her have strong round 2 performances, a la Haley. What I was talking about with Haley Fouch earlier, and what it would take for her to beat Ethan Irwin. The problem is, I just am not convinced that her general knowledge is strong enough even to complement a strong round 2. I mean, I don't know the numbers across her teams and singles performances on round 1 questions, but I'd be shocked if she's averaging more than 5 points round 1. And I think that, maybe you could argue that Roca is a little bit off the pace these days as well, at least compared to how it used to be. But I think he's going to have enough to get by Silvestrini in this round 1 match.
Yeah, I think he is a little bit off the pace, but I think that's why he'll probably be happy with the matchup that he got here, because to your point, I do think Rachel is definitely on the weaker side of the players in this tournament. I think Roca desperately needs a bounce back. Quite frankly, he stunk in that match that Founding Fathers had against Corruption. He didn't have much to offer at all, even in round 1. And I think, if he loses this, that might be it for the Outlaw. But I can't see him losing it. I think that even if he has an off day, he still has enough to beat Rachel. I think going forward is where we may have more of a question about how far Roca can actually make it. But I don't think, kind of like Mark Riley, I don't think that the first round match is going to pose much of a difficulty for him. So I'm going with the Outlaw.
Yeah, no matter what he says in promos or in other interviews, I don't think that he wants it as much as he used to. I think winning that singles belt last year, in terms of his individual career, I think that was all that he wanted to accomplish still in singles. And, would he bite at the chance to retain or get the belt again and have a chance to defend it, which is something he hasn't been able to do?
Right.
Absolutely. But I think that from this position where he's 4 matches away from a title shot, I don't think he wants it that badly yet. And that's okay, right? Like he said multiple times in interviews this year that the single thing he wants to still achieve in the Schmoedown is that team belt with Dan and the Founding Fathers. which is awesome. But it just, yes, I think it will get him through round one. But when he's coming up either against Janine or Mike in the next round, which we're going to talk about in a second, I think that he'll find it much more difficult.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And that's a nice segue to that final match of the first round. Another match that we saw this season pretty recently, Mike Kalinowski.
White Red.
Yeah, the man who is possessed right now. He did, of course, lose to Snyder, which proves that he is human. I had my doubts there for a while because he was on one of the best runs maybe in Schmoedown history. Yeah. And was very close to being Mikey Three Belts, and he's still close to being Mikey Three Belts. He just, he's got four matches here to become Mikey Three Belts. And his first one is against someone who is not a slouch for sure. Janine. Mike, I think did have a TKO in that first match.
He did. Yeah.
But
it actually started his recent run. I think he was 4 matches away from the title belt then too. I don't know. I have to count it up, but sorry. What?
Yeah, but sorry, there was just a glitch there. I think that was an off day for Janine. I mean, she has struggled in round 3 to be sure. There's no denying that.
Less so recently, to be fair. I mean, yes, against Mike, definitely true, but we started to see some signs of that being put aside.
And I think that if you want to beat someone like Mike Kalinowski, you're going to have to get probably a couple of round 3 questions correct at least. So I guess, it may depend on if she gets her categories or not, but I think she is capable of winning this match. But for me, kind of like Bibiani, I mean, it's hard to pick against KO right now. He did have a setback against Snyder. I do think that perhaps fatigue played a part in it. And Burnett making him turn around and play the match immediately, because it seems like he was a little rusty. He had a low score, not the score that you would expect to see from him typically in singles, especially given the run that he was on. I think with more preparation and freshness, he is going to be able to do the double over Janine, who, again, bad matchup for her. She's a good player, but I think KO has a little bit too much right now.
Yeah, I think Janine is so close to breaking through. I really believe that. I think she's really close to breaking into that next tier of player. I think she's right on the cusp of that second or third tier, depending on how you break it down. And I just think that this is another bad draw for her. I think that if she were to be able to build up confidence and get ahead of steam up in this tournament, she might be able to pull off some upsets, and she still might pull off the upset against Mike. We'll see. But I think that it's going to be really hard for her. Her most recent match, maybe she's played the time machine since then. She's played with the time machine since then. But I guess, no, actually it was the same week. I don't know which. So I guess the singles match would have been more recent because it was the Janine week. But it's tough because her most recent match was against Mike. So she's going to get a chance to get him back. But Mike's too hot right now. I agree that fatigue played a factor in the match against Snyder. But I think even in that match against Snyder, he grinded out. I mean, I guess that's the first time in a while we've seen him without getting Bond. A particularly tough category for him. I'm actually forgetting the category that he got on the wheel for that round, but it clearly was one that did not do him well. And I thought he was in deep trouble until Snyder struggled with his round 2. So that win could have been a much larger margin, and the match could have been a lot less close if Snyder had gotten something that he was successful in round 2. And we've seen Janine be a rock star in round 2 and put in strong performances with categories like, rom-coms is the one that comes first to my mind. So if she were to get that, I think she's a strong enough competitor to get a good deal of points in just about any category. But if you find her getting rom-coms, Mike could have his back against the wall in round 2 if he doesn't get something that's a little bit more of a strength than what he got against Snyder, which I believe was it Kate Blanchett. Is that what he got? I can't remember.
I was sitting here trying to remember as well, but I can't. I should, because it was just the other thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where I think Janine is capable of pulling off the upset, because I agree that was a bit of an off day, but she still got TKO'd, and she's going to need to put in a stronger performance and need Mike to be a little bit off in order to beat him. So I'm still going to go with Mike.
All right. That completes our first round predictions. So let's move on to the second round, Scott. We'll have a few different matchups here since we had some different picks in the first round. So we'll start with you. Who do you think is going to win between Mark Riley and Whitney Seibold?
Yeah, this is a tough one to predict. I think that this is, in some ways, if you're on the Mark Riley train, I think this is a great matchup for him in the second round, not having to play someone, in the other half of his half of the draw, the other quarter on his half of the draw. So not having to play a Ben Bateman, his teammate, of course, or a Lon Horace or a Paul Preston, not having to play any of those guys. I think Whitney or Brendan is an ideal matchup for him. And you know what? I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to give it to him over Whitney. I think that I might regret this pick, but I'm going to go with Mark Riley. I think that although Whitney might have enough to break through against Brendan, I think that motivation that will slightly, elevate him in that match will disappear a little bit when it goes up against Mark Riley. And I think Mark Riley will be hungry to prove that he still has what it takes in the singles division, because he hasn't had a good year in the singles division. Of course, I mean, obviously, I guess, did he play in any other matches besides Snyder in singles?
He beat McQueenie, yeah.
I'm sorry?
He beat McQueenie.
Right, he beat McQueenie, and that was a great match between the two of them, but maybe he got a little bit lucky with McQueenie blowing it in round 3, which isn't the first time that he's done that. So I think he'll have a lot to prove, more so than Whitney in this match, and I think that will get him over the line, and that'll move him on to the semifinals.
Yeah, so I've got Mark Riley against Brendan Meyer over here. Yep. Scott, whenever I pick my NCAA tournament bracket, I always take a flyer on one or two teams, and have them winning not just one game but 2 games. And rarely am I actually right about who the team is that makes the Cinderella run. But every once in a blue moon, I am right, and so I'm going to take a flyer on this one. I think Brendan Meyer is on a roll right now. I think he really wants this, and Riley, my misgivings are, kind of what you talked about there. I think that his 2 singles matches have been interesting this year because I think, like you said, the match against McQueenie, he was probably lucky to win that match because McQueenie missed, I believe, his 3 and 5, which is not something that he's going to do very often. However, then you look at that match against Snyder, and I think that's a match where he was unlucky not to win. Because it did come down to Snyder literally guessing the only Welsh actor that he knew.
Reese Ivins or whatever.
Yeah, in order to get the answer right. And then, of course, Riley could not get his question in the end. But that's unlucky, when your opponent guesses the answer to a 5-pointer. I mean, that's not going to happen very often. So it's hard to know what to make of Mark Riley at this point. I think he has shaken off the ring rust to some extent. But it has been a while.
He hasn't shaken it off by now. I don't think he's ever going to shake it off.
It has been a while since he played a match, though, is my point. And
I guess that'll be the live event, the Chicago live event.
Yeah, I guess that was the last time, and they were defeated in that match.
That was April. So, that was a long time ago.
I'm going with Brendan Meyer. I think the kid is my sleeper pick on this side of the bracket. There's usually one sleeper who makes a run in the Ultimate Schmoedown. There wasn't really last year, but certainly a couple years ago there were.
It was tough with only 8 people in the tournament last year to have a sleeper.
Yes, that is true. You really had the best of the best. No one was really that much of a sleeper, but
I guess Clark Wolf maybe.
Yeah. But I'm going with the kid here. I like him to reach the semifinals and pull off the upset against Mark Yodi Riley.
I can see it happening too. Like if I had picked Brendan Meyer in round 1, I think that I probably would have picked him over Mark Riley. And I guess maybe I rate him higher than the rankings than other people do. I don't think it would be that big of an upset because I think that, since the free for all, his stock is pretty high.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I hope that I'm not reading too much into his free-for-all performance because, again, round 1 questions. But he had a solid match against Video Drew. And their first teams match, obviously, he played really well, too, with Shazam. So,
it'll be interesting to see what his category coverage is in round 2 because we're still a little bit new on seeing what he can do with categories that aren't his strength. Honestly, is it Oscars movies? What even is his strength?
That's a good question. I don't really know.
I think it's Oscars.
It might be, but who knows? Maybe we'll go watch this match after this, and Brendan will be out, and I will look like an idiot when this video is published, but it won't be the first time. It won't be the last time. Okay, Scott, let's move on to our next quadrant here, our next quarterfinal matchup. You have Lon Harris against Ben Bateman. Who do you like in that one between the professor and the boss?
Yeah, it's a juicy rematch from last year's qualifying gauntlet for the Ultimate Schmoedown Singles tournament. I'm sorry?
Which Ben won, I believe, correct?
Yes, he did win. He did win. I think that was considered a bit of an upset at the time, all things considered. And you know what? I don't think that Lon will be favored this time. I think that Ben will be favored in terms of rankings. I could be wrong. I have to double check that. But I'm going to go with Ben again this time, probably voting with my heart more so than my mind. But I think even with my mind, I might still go with Ben. I think he's one of the sharpest players. He's still, even put up against Lon, I think he's still the best player without a belt on his resume. Of course, Lon is in that category too. But especially given the performances that we've seen Lon recently, I think a little bit weaker since his heyday, kind of middle of last season before he played Ethan Irwin. I think that Ben is better right now, and I think that Ben will push through this one. I think that he's going to want it. I think he's going to really relish the opportunity to play his teammate Mark Riley. If Mark, I don't know the order in which they're taping.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
It would be really great for the Horsemen to have two people in the semifinals. And I think that Ben is their best bet to get there because I think that he has an easier draw than Mark, and he's a stronger player than Mark. I think even Mark would admit that. So I'm going to go with Ben Bateman.
Okay, so I have Ben Bateman against Paul Preston. And Scott, I don't know if you sent in a bracket for the contest or not, but I'll go ahead and tell you that I did have Paul Preston winning this match in the bracket that I sent in.
No, you're flipping.
No, I'm going to be a flip-flopper because it could go either way. I think there are certainly some good points to be made in favor of Ben. I kind of went with Paul in that bracket because it was more of a unique choice. And so I think in those types of contests, you give yourself a better chance if you of being, the last man standing, if you go with a more unique choice, and then it happens to come true. So a little bit of strategy there, but I am going to go with Ben. He's very strong. He's going to want it because of the Horseman curse. Can't discount the Horseman curse, of course.
I think he's just going to want it because he wants the belt, man. I don't even think I have anything to do with the Horseman.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that is true. Of course, everyone wants the belt, but I think especially because of what the Horsemen have been going through, I think Paul Preston, very good player. There's a reason I didn't just pick him for strategy purposes in that other bracket.
Yeah.
I think he's very capable of winning this match. I think pretty much with any of these matches we're going to pick at this point, they could go either way. But on this flip of the coin, I'm going to give it to the boss.
Fair enough.
All right, Scott, right side of the brackets. And again, we had a different matchup up top. So you have Ethan Irwin taking on Chance Ellison. Who do you like in that match?
I believe another rematch. No, or did Chance play Dan in the first round last year? Who did Chance play in the first round of the Ultimate Schmoedown Singles tournament last year? Was it? I think it was Ethan.
It was Ethan, yes.
Yeah. Man, what a matchup. That's awful. Now it sucks to be Chance. No, I'm going to go with Ethan. I'm a bit biased because, I just think Ethan is incredible. I think that we've seen him fewer times, and I've already talked about all this, so I'm just going to breeze past it here. But he's a little bit rustier, so maybe Chance has a chance to get that upset and record a second upset because I think that his win over Bibiani would be an upset. But I'm picking Ethan, and I would pick Ethan over Bibbs too.
Yeah, so Ethan against Bibbs is what I have. Obviously, we sort of saw this match with the three-way match that happened with Roca in there. It is always weird, because of the format is different, the stealing dynamics, right? It's hard to say that because Bibiani won that match, he has a head-to-head advantage here. But it's two titans of the game. They've both been movie trivia Schmoedown champion. They're both incredible players. And I was thinking that Bibiani was the one who beat Irwin, but it was Andreyko to get to that title match. But I'm going to go with Ethan. I just think this feels like the fact that we haven't seen him that much this season. It feels like he's been in some lane. I know that he has a real job, and that's probably what he's been doing. But
he's too busy. Man, he was lining up that new Matrix movie, man.
Yeah, that's true. I just feel like people are discounting him maybe a little bit because we haven't seen him as much this year, and maybe he hasn't been his usual buzzsaw self in a couple of the matches that we've seen him in. And I think the sleeping giant is going to be awoken for this tournament, and he definitely has the stuff to get past Bibiani, and I think he will do just that and make it to the semifinals.
There you go.
All right, Scott, I believe we do have the same matchup down in the bottom right quadrant. So we can both take a stab at this one. John Rocha, the Outlaw, and Mike, the Killer, Kalinowski.
I think if anything's going to wake John Rocha up, it's going to be a match against KO. So I think you'll get, if John does make it past Silvestrini and Mike does make it past Janine, he's gonna want that one. I think you're going to see him wake up. But I think it's going to be too little too late. I think Mike is just incredible right now. I mean, we've talked about it already. We could talk about it probably for an hour about how amazing he is. He's doing. And so I really just see this going one way again. It's going to be Mike. I think Rocha's just not as sharp as he used to be. And I think that then, at the stage of the quarterfinal stage, him wanting it, I think it's just going to be too late to be able to study enough to compete with Mike.
Yeah, this match is not going to lack for trash talk. You can definitely bet on that when Rocha and Kalinowski are going at each other. Like you said, I think there's something to be said for the fact that Rocha is really going to want to win this match because it is Kalinowski, because of the rivalry, the very one-sided rivalry so far that the Horsemen and Corruption have been having this season. Because of those two team matches that the Founding Fathers have lost. All these factors are going to go into Rocha really wanting to win this match. But I think Rocha is a very emotional player, and sometimes his emotions can get the best of him. To be fair, I think you could say the same about Kalinowski, and arguably that's what cost him in that match against Snyder. He really rushed into that one answer, and
we won't do that again.
Who knows? It might have ended up being the difference in the match.
We'll never know.
Yeah, we won't. But so emotions will be running high. But I think when you factor in, like you said, that KO is going to want to learn from that mistake and probably not going to make a mistake like that again, at least not this soon after that Snyder match. And you also factor in the fact that Rocha has been a little bit off the pace this season and struggled in recent matches. Combine that with the high tension that is going to be running in this match. And I think Mike gets the slight advantage, though I'll be rooting for my boy, the Outlaw. I would love to see, I think that I would compare what the Outlaw is faced with here to like what Christian Harloff had in front of him in that when he made his run to the title back in 2016. I think nobody really gave him much of a chance. He was a veteran of the game at that point. We know now that he was going to step away basically if he had not made it all the way and won the title. But was able to just sort of channel up some magic, from back in the day and beat Snyder, beat Bibiani, and then take out Dan Murrell in that slog of a match to win the title. So I think we could see something like that from Rocha. It would be cool if Rocha could have one last run like that. But I'm just not sure if there's any precedent to suggest that that's going to happen recently. So slight edge to Mike. I think he moves on to the semifinals.
Agreed.
All right. Semifinal time, Scott. You have Mark Yodi Riley going up against Ben the Boss Bateman. Who's the boss? Internal war. Who is going to be the boss in this match?
I think Ben's going to be the boss. He's going to wear his namesake well. We're going to learn who the boss is and who's the boss. And if we're being honest, I think Mark also knows who the boss is in that partnership. As good as they both are, and I mean they're a great team. I can't wait to see them in the Ultimate Schmoedown Teams tournament again, where they of course made their name last year. I think that Ben is going to be the favorite, and I think Ben is going to come out on top, making it to the finals. Again, I am wearing that Team Bateman shirt, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think Ben's gonna wear his white Hanes T-shirt with his suit jacket well into the finals.
Okay, so I've got Ben Bateman against Brendan Meyer in the semifinal match. And this is what I'm struggling with because, like I said, in my bracket that I submitted, I had Paul Preston beating Ben. So this is not one that I had to think about beforehand. And part of me wants to go with the kid just because I'm taking a flyer, might as well go all the way with it, right? But I think common sense has to start to set in at some point. Not that the kid can't pull off this win, because I think he can. But I think at a certain point, the magic might run out. I don't think that he has the all-around knowledge of someone like Paul Oyama to just come in and go on an incredible run right off the bat and get there to the title. I don't know that we've seen that from him yet outside of those round one questions. So I think, I'm going to go with the boss. I think he's just going to prove too strong for Brendan in this match. And I'm not wearing a Team Bateman shirt. So even though I am a fan, you could take my words with a little less of a grain of salt than you could take Scott's, I suppose. And I've got Ben moving on to the finals.
You had to pick sides, though. You would be Team Bateman.
Yes, of course. All day. All right. The other semifinal, Scott, I believe we have the same matchup going on over here. Ethan Irwin against Mike Kalinowski. Two guys who have not faced each other, but man, this could be an epic match if we get to see this one.
Yeah, it's exciting because I've managed to pick my way into several rematches from last year's tournament between Ben and Lon and Ethan and Chance. Something that you did not give yourself the option to do. But I think that this being a new match, it'll be amazing. I really hope we get this matchup because these are two guys that I really want to see play because they're not a contrast of styles, although I do think Ethan just doesn't study. I think he just rolls into matches and he's just a freaking genius.
To your point, they were talking about this on Collider Live today, and I think it's been mentioned before in some capacity on some video somewhere that Ethan, he said to, I think it was Kalinowski or Ben Bateman at one point, he's like, it's cheating to study. Like you just need to go in with the knowledge that you have in your head. And I kind of understand that because that's part of with the purpose of trivia, not to get super philosophical about it, but that's the fun of trivia to me, is just when you get asked about things that you have picked up in your just time of loving movies, that you've managed to absorb that knowledge, not for the purposes of winning a trivia contest. You just happen to have absorbed that knowledge, and then that knowledge happens to come in handy when you are in a trivia contest. I do sympathize with that view, but it's kind of like looking at the game of baseball nowadays, and the way that the statistics heavy approach has become the norm. Whether you like it or not, I think you have to acknowledge that it is the way that the Schmoedown is going, the way of the Kevin Smetzes and the Mike Kalinowskis, the people who have these elaborate study methods and spend hours on end studying. I think that is going to be the secret to success going forward. So it is an interesting contrast in styles as well.
No, absolutely. And I think it lends more credence to my theory that Mike Kalinowski is the Novak Djokovic of the movie Trivia Schmoedown.
I heard about that.
But, pure knowledge versus studying, I mean, contrast in styles, contrast in general stress fee versus highly strung personalities too, just on the table. Mike, I mean, even you watched those last two matches last week. The guy looked like his eyes, he looked dead inside. I think he was just exhausted. It's kind of how Mark Andreyko looked, I think, at the end of last season, for comparison. I think that he will get back up for it, though, by the time the tournament rolls around, certainly this deep in the tournament. And when he's so close again, I think he's going to be really, really up for it. And it's so hard. It's so hard to pick against Ethan Irwin because he's so smart. But I think I'm going to go with Ethan. Yeah, I hadn't really decided until just now, but I'm going to go with Ethan. I think that we saw a vulnerability in Mike with something like Cate Blanchett, if that's who he got. I can't remember. I'm sorry. It's some female actress category, I believe, that he got. But I think that the fact that we know that those weaknesses exist now, and I think that just would not happen with Ethan. There's not a single thing on the wheel that you could pick for Ethan that's going to result in him getting fewer than 4 or 5 points in a round. And I think that fact, I think it means that I have to go with Ethan, even though I think Mike is probably a better player of the game. I just don't think he has the natural gifts like Ethan does to pull it through. But you know what? If he proves me wrong and we get a Ben Bateman Mike Kalinowski rematch, I'm not going to be complaining too much.
Yeah, I mean, it is again, to go back to the analogy, it's the old baseball against the new baseball. And Scott, I'm an old baseball guy, and I'm going to continue to be the old baseball guy,
Yeah.
at least when I predict this match, because I do have Ethan coming out on top. I think that, we talked about in that last match how emotions could play heavy when you're talking about Roca against Kalinowski. I think that's something we haven't really seen from Ethan Irwin is any sort of emotion whatsoever, and that can be intimidating because he doesn't get rattled because he's so confident in his own knowledge. I mean, like we just talked about, he doesn't feel the need to study, partially just on principle, but also he has so much knowledge in his head
He doesn't
that I
have
think,
to.
right, he probably feels like he doesn't really have to, that he has a lot of knowledge there, and he's going to pick up even more just in his daily life, working for Silver Pictures and just living the life that he does. And so I think, it's old school versus new school. You might call me crazy for it with the run that KO has been on. But I think that the smooth stylings of Mr. Big Time Ethan Irwin are going to take him through to the final match.
Singles is always going to be the hardest one for him, and I think it will stay that way.
All right, Scott, I think we have the same final match here, actually. So in my bracket that I submitted, I will say that I had Paul Preston going up against Ethan Irwin in the finals, and I had Ethan winning. So I have a different matchup here with Ethan Irwin taking on Ben Bateman. That's what we both have as our final match. Perhaps a bit of a chalky selection in the end, but we had a little bit of fun along the way. At least I did with having the kid make a little bit of a run.
Hey, the chalk almost always plays out in the tournament. Just you bet the chalk, you're going to win most of the time.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Virginia did win it all this year as a number 1 seed.
And Duke the year
but
before.
There, you do have those UMBC moments every now and then. But let's talk about this final match we have here, Scott. Ethan versus Ben. Who do you like? What's going to be the X factors in this match, and who's going to move on to that live spectacular to face off against either Paul or Jeff?
Yeah, who has the live X factor? I mean, goodness gracious, I have no idea. The thing is, and we talk about this anytime I feel like we predict a big Ben Bateman match. We talked about it with the match with Kalinowski. I think that Ben's mind tricks just don't work on some people. Yeah. I don't think they're going to work on Ethan. He's just too cool of a cucumber, I think, for it. And he just strolls in, he does his business, and he goes about his day, and you can't do anything to stop him. You talk about him being a buzzsaw. He's a very mild-mannered buzzsaw, let's put it that way. I think that it'll be very difficult to get under Ethan's skin, and I think Ben will need to get under Ethan's skin to beat him. I'm wearing my Team Bateman shirt. I would love it if Ben were to earn himself a title shot. But I think one of the tough things for him here is that, I mean, yes, Ethan did lose a 5-round match to Dan Murrell, but I think the 5-round match here, it doesn't help Ben at all, I think. I think that unless, I mean, the betting round does add a flavor of unpredictability, but if Ethan gets a little bit sharper with the buzzers, I think that he's going to be beating Ben. I think it may not even be close by the time the 5th round rolls around. I think it'll just build up over time, and I think Ben would need to rely on the shorter format to give himself an advantage and have fewer opportunities for Ethan to separate himself because, round to round, Ethan's on average probably going to be scoring more points. Of course, the speed round and the betting round are unique in their format, and so anything could happen. But I think that more often than not, what's going to be happening is going to be happening in Ethan's favor in those rounds. And so I'm going to go with Ethan against Team Bateman here, but Ben making it this far, and if he really turns it up to the level we know he has, he could pull off that upset. I just think that Ethan is another tier of player.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think as good of a player Ben is, I think, he has shown weaknesses this season, particularly in that match against Kalinowski, what happened in round 3 there. Team matches this season, Who's the Boss, has struggled a little bit. And I just think we haven't seen the same kind of weaknesses from Ethan. We have seen weaknesses, but not quite.
I mean, Ethan's scoring over 20 points in every match. Yeah. I mean, you have to score 23 or 24 points to beat him.
Yeah, so not quite to the same degree as we have as Ben. So I think that That's going to be big. Like you said, I don't think Ben is going to be able to get into Ethan's head. I do think the speed round could be big in this match because I seem to recall that Ethan not being particularly fleet on the buzzers in the past. Maybe his laid back approach doesn't serve him particularly well in this speed round setting. And we have seen what Ben Bateman can do in the speed round. I'm thinking about that movie release dates match where he just like went ham once it got down to the
That's
buzzer.
movie release dates. That's not the same.
Yeah, I know. But I think he can be quicker on the buzzer, so that could be big. But like you said, I think round 5 could be the great leveler. And I think Ben would have to build a little bit of an advantage going into round 5 if he wants to win this match. I don't know that he would be able to pull it out unless he has a 2 or 3 point lead going into that final round. So
I don't see that happening. I just don't see that happening. I know, again, with rounds 3 and 4, anything can happen. It's the speed round. I think that's a great point that you bring up, that Ethan's a little bit slower on the buzzers. He was playing Roca for his title shot. So, I mean, I think there's an asterisk there. Even though I think Roca probably did really want that match. I mean, we talked about him wanting to defend. So maybe less of an asterisk there than I originally thought about. But when the match with Dan, when he was defending, I mean, Dan definitely beat him pretty badly on the buzzers, if I'm remembering. So that's a good point. And, you know, Ethan doesn't study. I doubt he's probably going to prepare with the buzzers either. So we'll see. Yeah, that's a fair point.
But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going with big time here. I think he's just going to be too much of a burden for someone like Ben. I think Ben, at least for the time being, is going to remain the best player to never win a belt.
Depends on who's the boss plays first.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they have the chance to make a run in the teams tournament, but the teams tournament is a whole nother bear. And I have a feeling when we pick that, we're going to be pulling our hair out with some of the matchups, just as competitive as the team division has been. Yeah. But yeah, there you go. There you have it. We have completed our brackets. Some disparities along the way, but we ended up in the same place with Ethan Irwin defeating Ben Bateman in the finals.
We picked the chalk because I think Ethan's the top ranked player. So
yeah,
number 2 in the rankings.
As with the NCAA tournament, we will probably be throwing our brackets out by the second or third match.
The first match for you after Brendan loses to Whitney.
No, right. We'll find that out here soon, I guess. But you know, it's nice to hope. It's nice to have that hope and optimism going into the tournament that I can pick the finals. And you know, we talk about that 2016 Ultimate Schmoedown. Or 2017 rather, which was so crazy and there were so many upsets. But, you know, it was counterbalanced, I think, by last year's where there weren't really that many upsets. And the match that you had in the end between Clark Wolf and who was it?
Clark Wolf and what? Sorry?
Who did she face in that final match?
Wasn't it Ethan?
Yes, it was, because she almost won. But she said Southside with me instead of Southside with you. So I think that final match, you know, again, that was a pretty chalky finish. I think that those are two of the players that you would have expected to see in the finals of the Ultimate Schmoedown.
I mean, didn't Clark beat Dan? I don't think that's a chalk pick.
No, Clark played Dan at the Spectacular, and she did beat him in the tournament. That's right. Yeah. But there weren't any really huge upsets. So I think that
because Dan played JTE to get into that match.
Yeah.
At the Spectacular.
So I think that it's not necessarily unwise to pick chalk here. I think
not JTE. It couldn't have been JTE. Sorry, he was out. I don't know who it was.
Who it was that did what?
I said Dan played JTE to get into the match with Clark, but that's not right because JTE was out of the.
I think Dan played against Stacey Howard.
In the first round. I'm talking about after he lost, he played the loser of whoever Ethan played in the semifinals it was in Draco. That's who it was.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that got us a little off track there, but so I don't think it's crazy to pick chalk. There have been upsets in the past, but there have also been chalky finishes in the past. And I think that there will be some upsets early, but I think that it is all going to even out in the end with Ethan beating Ben. So Scott, anything to add before we finish this first live stream?
Yeah, I'm going to correct myself again. Clark did not beat Dan in the semifinals. Clark beat Andreyko in the semifinals. Ethan beat Dan.
Because Dan beat
played
Clark at the
Andreyko.
Spectacular.
Yes, Dan played Andreyko. Dan beat Andreyko. Dan played Clark, beat Clark, and then it was Ethan against Dan.
Yeah,
there we go.
That's right.
The long crooked road to where we are now. All right, cool.
Thank you, corrections department.
Yeah.
All right,
Absolutely.
that should just about do it. Anything further to add before we conclude, Scott?
No, I'm just excited that we got our first live stream under our belt and looking forward to doing this again in the future.
Yeah, it's been fun. All right,
I gotta
there
figure
you have
out a
it.
new arrangement where I can get some, because I have my Schmoedown prints. I gotta like hang them behind me next time. So I can
also where you don't look so much taller than me. That'd be nice as well.
Just get a different chair. Come on, man.
But this chair is so comfortable.
That's it. My chair is not comfortable at all, so maybe you're winning.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We will see you real soon in another live stream soon, hopefully. But this has been fun. We will see you next time. This has been Champs Lunch. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.